Hello, and welcome to the first Saratoga Power Lunch. I'm excited to be holding this new monthly webinar series on the second Tuesday of the month from 12 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. so we can all learn about Saratoga in bite-sized pieces. The schedule of upcoming webinars is available on the city website. You can also visit the website to see recordings of past webinars and submit webinar questions or suggested topics. Today's webinar will feature a presentation on the City of Saratoga housing element by City Manager James Lindsay and the Community Development Director Debbie Pedro. They'll be talking about how you can help the city decide where to place more than 1,700 new homes in Saratoga. This year marks the start of what will be a 2-year engagement process to update the city's next housing element. In March, the City Council directed staff to begin the engagement effort as early as possible, so all Saratoga residents have the chance to weigh in on what could result in really significant changes for our community. James and Debbie, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Mayor Zhao, thank you so much for this invitation and this opportunity to share information about the housing element update as part of your first Saratoga Power Lunch. This update will be a major effort, as you explained, for the city, and I hope to see everyone at a future community meeting and that they take the time to sign up to receive our housing element newsletter to stay engaged in this 2-year process. So with that short introduction, I'd like to go ahead and Debbie, start off the presentation.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Mayor Zhao, for having us. Since 1969, cities and counties in California have been required to plan for future housing needs for all people at all income levels by including a housing element in their general plan. State law requires that we update the housing element every 8 years. Before housing elements are adopted, housing needs are assessed throughout the state. After identifying regional housing needs, the total number of housing units projected to be needed at each income level is then distributed among the jurisdiction in the region. This process is called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or also referred to as RHNA. In Santa Clara County, the methodology for distributing the projected housing needs is led by the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG. Assuming ABAG's draft distribution or something close is adopted, Saratoga will need to identify how it will add more than 1,700 new housing units across a wide range of affordability levels between 2023 and 2031. I'll pause here for a moment so you can see the current draft RHNA for Saratoga, as well as our RHNA in the past 2 cycles, from 2007 to 2014 and from 2015 to 2023. You can see that the difference is substantial, and this is true throughout the Bay Area. Over 17 housing units would be a significant increase in Saratoga's RHNA allocation for this next housing element update. But Saratoga is not alone in this experience. Across the state, cities and counties are being asked to plan for a substantial increase in future housing. Saratoga's RHNA, using the current methodology, accounts for roughly 1% of the total units allocated to all of Santa Clara County. I'll pause here for a moment so you can see the different draft RHNA allocations for the jurisdiction in Santa Clara County. For the upcoming housing element update, the affordability income levels begin at less than $70,800 for a 4-person household using the current area median income for Santa Clara County. And I'll pause here a moment again so you can see the different income levels that apply to the types of housing in the RHNA. In the summer, Saratoga and other Bay Area cities will have an opportunity to appeal their RHNA allocations. While the city can file an appeal, the standards governing appeals make it very, very unlikely that the draft allocation will be substantially changed. Most changes are the result of minor calculation errors. The final RHNA allocation will be provided in the winter following the appeal period. Jurisdictions will then use their total RHNA allocation to prepare and submit a draft housing element to the state for adoption by January 2023. A key component of the housing element is the housing sites inventory. The housing sites inventory will need to identify specific sites in Saratoga that are suitable and available to develop the more than 1,700 residential units. These sites must be zoned for different types of housing to allow for development of units at a variety of income levels. Examples of different housing types include single-family homes, townhomes, apartments, condos, or accessory dwelling units, often referred to as granny units or in-law quarters. Another essential piece of the housing element are the policies and programs to go along with the site inventory to help ensure that there is an opportunity for housing units across all income levels. As mentioned earlier, state law requires housing element gets updated every 8 years. If the city fails to revise and update the housing element before the deadline, the city could be left with little say over all future development, from building permits to subdivisions or use permits. Additionally, there has been a fundamental shift in the way the state views cities' obligations related to their housing elements. For many years, the primary goal of the housing element was to ensure cities and counties had zoning in place that would allow the market to build housing projected to be needed. But more recently, there has been an increasing legislative pressure on cities and counties to take responsibility to ensure that the state-determined housing needs are built in addition to planning for them in the housing element. SB 35, for example, provides that in cities and counties where development is not on track to meet their projected housing needs, are subject to by right approvals of qualifying multifamily residential projects. This means that there is no discretionary review or public input process for these projects. Between 2015 and 2019, the city of Saratoga issued a total of 150 permits for new housing units. 30 of those were for single-family homes, and 120 were for accessory dwelling units. By the end of the current 8-year housing element cycle, we estimate that the city will have issued permits for approximately 175 housing units. The city has not denied any applications for housing that have been proposed, but as you can see, even without these denials, we're still far, far below the last housing element cycle's RHNA allocation of 439 units. As a result, Saratoga is subject to SB 35. And last year, the city received an application to build housing at the Quito Shopping Center and was required to approve the project that will result in the construction of 90 townhomes, 9 of which will be affordable. Planning for more than 1,700 new housing units between 2023 and 2031, along with increasing state pressure, could fundamentally change the character of our city. Given the magnitude of this challenge, we want every single resident to have a voice in the housing element update. So the first thing you can do is help by visiting the city's website at www.saratoga.ca.us/housing. There you can sign up to receive the housing element newsletter, so you will never miss an update throughout the process. You can also help us prepare for upcoming community meetings. After watching the first 4 housing element videos, you can use the online form to submit any questions you have. This will help us tailor the meetings to cover what the community needs. Community meetings are scheduled for Thursday, April 22nd at 7 p.m., Saturday, April 24th at 9 a.m., and Wednesday, April 28th at 12 p.m. At these meetings, we'll give another overview of the process and discuss topics community members want more information on or still have questions about. The goal of these meetings is to ensure everyone is fully prepared to participate in upcoming conversations about housing in Saratoga. After we conclude the community meetings in April, we'll use the information we gather to prepare for another series of community meetings to focus on the values and priorities of the community, as well as potential policy options. We hope you'll stay involved in the process and help us to make sure the voices of your neighbors and friends in Saratoga area are heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie and James. Thank you for your presentation. Before today's webinar, we asked our attendees to submit questions about the housing element update. Our first question is, what can the city do to fight or reduce state housing demands?
That's a great question to kick us off. And I really do appreciate a lot of the frustration that we're hearing in the community about the demands that the state is making of cities across California. You know, the housing element laws, as Debbie had mentioned, has been in place for over 50 years. And we've seen the legislature be increasingly aggressive in the past 10 years in their demands of cities. Saratoga will continue our strong opposition to those increasing demands, but that comes obviously with a balance. While we're going to continue to track this important legislation and take positions, the City Council has recently taken positions on some state Senate bills that are currently working its way through Sacramento. And the City Council has taken a position to oppose SB 9, Senate Bill 9, which would substantially increase housing densities in our single-family neighborhoods, and Senate Bill 6, which would reduce the control the city has over the amount of housing that we would be willing to allow on our commercial properties. And again, we want to make sure that the state delegation that represents Saratoga, both in the Assembly and in the State Senate, are aware of the impacts that they are having on local control. But more specifically, Mayor, I wanted to show our, state our appreciation for the letter that you submitted to ABAG protesting the RENA distribution formula that Debbie had mentioned in her presentation. There is a chance to appeal our RENA. However, the criteria is going to be very narrow. And I think having that comment letter come out front, sharing our opinion quickly, was a demonstration that, we're tracking it. We really do not believe that these numbers make a whole lot of sense for Saratoga, but once they are set, they're numbers that we're going to have to deal with, right? And these appeal processes we've seen play out across the state in different regions. So different parts of California are on a different cycle than we are related to the housing element update process. And they're ahead of us. And we've not seen much success in their RENA appeals through their processes. So again, we'll definitely do our due diligence and file those applications in, but we are proceeding in going through this planning effort, assuming that there's not much of a reduction in the RENA allocation. And that's the balance that we're looking for, because ultimately we need to comply with state law so that we can retain the limited amount of local control we have left, because if we don't have a compliant housing element, then we'll end up losing that small amount we have left. So I'm hoping that addresses the question.
Thank you, James. Our next question is, will the city need to identify specific sites for housing development? How will these sites be selected?
I'll take that question. Yes, the city does need to identify specific sites for development in the next housing element. And in future phases of our engagement process, we will work with the community to identify where the community thinks new housing makes the most sense.
Thank you, Debbie. Can we identify one site in Saratoga for a high-rise that can accommodate 1,700 units?
Unfortunately, no. The state requires that the plans, including housing sites, densities, and policies, be realistic. If our community doesn't have a history of high-rise affordable developments, it is unlikely that the state will approve a housing element that relies on this approach to meet our RENA targets.
Next, what changes will be considered to add more than 1,700 new housing units to Saratoga?
I'll give Debbie a break and I'll take this one. When we create the housing sites inventory, we will be looking at how many units those various sites can accommodate. So existing development policies that we have will need to change to plan for these 1,700 new homes. And those development policies include building heights, converting some commercial properties to housing, increasing the number of homes allowed on an acre of land, are all going to be some examples of changes we're going to need to seriously be looking at. In June, we're planning to start the next phase of this engagement process that will be focused on the community values and priorities so that we can start identifying the changes that make the most sense to the community under these challenging circumstances.
Thank you, James. And our last question, will there be any study on how the addition of more than 1,700 units will impact our community?
Yes, once we received our final RENA allocation from ABAC this winter, we will start drafting the housing element document. And once that draft is done, we'll use it to prepare an environmental impact report, or an EIR. In the EIR process, we will evaluate various impacts that could result from the housing element, like an increase in traffic. And if there are any anticipated impacts, then the city also needs to identify how these impacts will be mitigated. We expect that the draft EIR will be circulated for public review sometime in 2022.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie and James, for your presentation. And thank you to everyone who joined us. A recording of this webinar will be posted on the city website. You can also find the topics for the upcoming webinars there. Our next Saratoga Power Lunch will be on Tuesday, May 11 at 12 p.m. We'll be discussing Asian hate and how we can stop it. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, everyone.